Hey there, everyone. Welcome to A Slice of Life with Kellie and John. Today, our wonderful guest, Tina Datsko. Did I say it correctly? Tina Datsko.
Yes, that's go.
Um, yeah, I read through her resume and she's just done so much. So you've written poems and articles and you've made documentaries. And I thought there was something else that you have in there. You've been in magazines and newspapers, and your documentaries are in museums, and you've won awards. And what else? What am I leaving out, Tina?
The spoken word films.
Ah,
So
okay.
yeah,
Spoken word films.
taking the poetry and creating films from it.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. I haven't even heard of that. So what would a spoken word film be? And where would you see it?
Yes. Okay. Well, so um, this is going to be a little bit of a long answer, if that's okay. So,
That's okay. That's what we're
um,
here for.
great. So I wrote a collection of poetry that's based on South American history. And it has to do it's poetry that meditates on the story of Simon Bolivar and the liberation of Latin America from Spain. So I wrote this collection of poetry, and then uh, my husband and I, because well, I was teaching in the film department at Cal State Long Beach, and so was he. He was teaching film production. I was teaching screenwriting. So we started collaborating on making short films of the poetry with uh, I read some of them. We had actors who read some of them, and then we visualized them with material we had shot when we were doing research in South America, and then other original artworks that were created. In fact, the artwork behind me is one of those works. And also dance choreography. So they're kind of like music videos, um,
Huh.
but with the spoken word, then there was music that was added later as well. And we made them with uh, grants, mostly through the university, and took them to film festivals in Europe and Latin America, the US and Canada. And so they were shown, in the film festivals. And then from that, when we were at the Chicago Latino Film Festival, and the poetry is bilingual. I wrote it in English. My husband translated it to Spanish, and then the book that was published of it, it's called The Delirium of Simon Bolivar. And then the individual films, two of them were selected to air on the Sundance Channel. Um,
Mhm.
so that, you know, gave them a opportunity to reach a broader audience as well.
Yeah. Well, how long would one of these films be? Like, are they 5 minutes or an hour or?
The individual poems they average, well, I'd say they run between 2 and 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah,
And
because I was thinking, how could you fill up an hour with a poem? Um,
not with one, but yeah, but then we put the whole thing together. I think it's 18 poems,
uh-huh.
put them all together with some additional narration about the history of Latin America. And that runs about 75 minutes. And
Oh,
then
okay.
that, longer documentary, we also took that. It premiered in the uh, Latin American Film Festival in Trieste, Italy.
So what is the story? And forgive me for being ignorant. So Simon Bolivar what was his role in the revolution?
Yes,
Is the
he's often called the George Washington of
Okay.
South America.
Yep.
And this was a little bit later. It was started in, about 1812 or so, the revolution, uh, and Bolivar was involved with it until his death in 1830. But over about 10 years, most of the colonies were liberated from Spain, that he uh, was part of, which he was a native of Venezuela. You might have heard of like the Simon Bolivar Symphony that Gustavo Dudamel uh, has conducted. So that's from Venezuela, and then they expanded into Colombia and Panama and Ecuador and Peru. And Peru was originally a larger, when it was a colony, it was a larger colony. It was considered Upper and Lower Peru. Upper Peru was the very mountainous part in the Andes. And so after Bolivar liberated it, it was named after him. It became the country Bolivia.
Right, right.
And
Wasn't he he was president for a while of
he was
Peru?
he was the first president of the whole what was called Gran Colombia,
Okay.
which
Oh,
was
okay.
yeah that Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador.
Yeah, so reading all this, this is a lot of work. So what is this your primary job, business? Like you just do poems and documentaries and artistic stuff, creative things about
At,
South America? Is it all about South America?
no, no. At this point, uh, working on my own projects is my primary work. In the past, I was teaching, so I taught at the University of Michigan while I was in graduate school there, and then I taught at Cal State Long Beach. We live in Long Beach, California. I taught there for many years, and I taught creative writing, screenwriting, and then also some classes in the dance department because I have a dance background. So I taught academic classes related to dance, like dance appreciation.
Okay.
And one that was really fun was a dance in film class where we looked at like musicals and films of dance. So yeah, so I taught for many years.
Well, I would want to know, being a writer that I am, I'd like to know when did you start writing? Whether it's your stories or you got into screenwriting, whichever might have come first, that certainly one would have led into the other.
Yes, thank you. Um, Poetry came first. And I actually started writing poetry even when I was a child and just really enjoyed it. I went to a very progressive elementary school and they gave us all kinds of projects. We got to do creative projects as part of our studies. So we made little, storybooks and bound them. And a friend of mine and I, we wrote a script and we made a film strip of it. We created the artwork that
Oh, wow.
was shot. So I was really fortunate to be able to be exposed to playing with things like that. And also my mother was very creative. So, she exposed me a lot to music. When I got, more serious about poetry was in college. I started studying it and just, developed such a passion for writing it. And one thing that worked out really well, I was also writing, fiction and studying playwriting. And so the University of Michigan had a program of writing awards for the students. So you could, turn in a manuscript and, if it won an award, there was a cash prize.
Mhm.
And that was extremely helpful because it helped me to, pay my tuition for college. So I didn't have to work as many jobs when I was able to do that. So I was able, my work received 14 of these Hopwood Writing Awards that really helped, a lot with.
So you're good at it, I would say.
Well, at least it seemed to fit with what people enjoyed. So,
Yeah, well, that makes good. That since we're talking about your awards, I highlighted on your biography the paragraph of your awards. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to read it because it's so many. Her work has won numerous awards, among them the Los Angeles Arts Council Award, 14 Holly Hopwood Awards, 2 Phi Kappa Phi Awards, the Rockham Dissertation Thesis Grant, the Atlanta Review's International Merit Award, and a Michigan Council for the Arts Artists grant. Her co-authored feature screenplay La Paz, a semifinalist for the Academy's Nicole Fellowship. I don't know if I'm saying all these right. Won Best Feature Screenplay at the Moondance International Film Festival. Her musical play Manuelita won Best Libretto and Best Musical Screenplay at Moondance. She holds MFAs in screenwriting from the University of Southern California and in creative writing from the University of Michigan. That's quite impressive, all of that. And then you've got a big filmography and everything. But I was reading through and I thought, all these awards. She's got to be good at what she does because they don't just give you awards for being mediocre. So very impressive. Yeah. And then you've got your writing has appeared, and I'm assuming, are these your poems in newspapers, magazines, anthologies, and so on in
Poems
several
and
countries?
Stories, yeah, as well.
Yeah. Do you care to share any of your pieces of work with us? Would you?
I would like to share some of the poems from the newest series of books.
Yeah,
Perhaps we can kind of go through the story a little bit, and then kind of when
please.
Oh,
Yeah.
please, yeah.
share some of those.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've talked a little bit about starting to write, and then I got interested in film actually through taking the playwriting class. I mean, I always loved film. I was one of those kids that, Saturday I was either at the movies or watching them on TV. So I always had that passion for them. But the playwriting professor at the University of Michigan, he was a playwright from New York, and they'd fly him in every week, to teach our class. But he also did a session on screenwriting. So that was my first exposure to that, which I found really, really interesting. And then my then boyfriend, now husband, was getting his PhD in film. And so he invited me sometimes to go to some of his film classes with him. So I got to sit in on some of those. Also took other film classes myself. But it was really the experience of making a documentary together. He was had been working for an organization that did projects for USAID, and so he was invited to do a documentary in Ecuador. And
What's USAID?
oh my gosh, it's through the United Nations. Wow, I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up. It's like, UNESCO, USAID. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
So what
but
kind of organization are they though? What do they do? And
basically projects that, that help other countries. So the documentary was, funded by USAID, and it was a documentary to help an organization in Ecuador that was called the Institute for the Child and the Family.
Mhm.
And it, provided support to, families and mothers, and helped with orphanages, helped with issues like, children that were abducted, all kinds of things like that. So the documentary was related to their work. And the experience of being there and, shooting the video and hearing people's stories had such a deep effect on me that it kind of galvanized me that I, really did want to work with film. And it was after that I decided to apply to study screenwriting, and was accepted at USC, and received a fellowship so that I was able to, that paid for my tuition.
Awesome. Okay. So what is your preference, or are you just like going with the ride? And I think in the creative world, sometimes we just, it changes how our outlet, because you've done the poems and then the documentaries. And what is your favorite thing to do, or is it just whatever's needed or whatever inspires you at the moment? Is that kind of your journey?
Um, it's looking back, because I've been doing this for a while, I feel like I've kind of been, led to projects that interested me, or, projects that I could somehow contribute to. So yeah, starting with writing poetry, and then writing the poetry about South America, and then making the films about that. And with the interest in Latin America, I also developed this musical play that is another view of the story about Simon Bolivar and Manuela Sáenz, who with whom he had a relationship for many years, and she was a very unconventional woman, very ahead of her time, very independent, and was a patriot who participated in their revolution very actively, and including saving Bolivar's life twice.
Oh,
Uh, and so that was,
how did she
the
save his life?
um, well, one of the times was there was a masquerade ball, and they were going to assassinate him at the ball, and she overheard about this and
Hold on.
got him out of there.
Wow.
And then the second time, the group of conspirators came to assassinate him in the presidential palace. And she basically stalled them and got him out a window, and so that he could get away. And then he was, basically escaped and was hiding during the night until the uprising had been put down, and then he was able to come out again.
Wow.
So yeah, very dramatic stuff.
Yeah. Wow. And I see, your interest in it. Is your husband Hispanic? Because you said he translated. So is
Yes,
he
yeah,
your
yeah. My
kind of
husband was born in Bolivia,
okay.
so he
Okay.
you know is from that background, native speaker of Spanish. And um, when we were both students at the University of Michigan, you know, he had perfected his English at that point, and was getting his doctorate.
Wow. Well, and
So
how
yeah,
does this all fit into your core values in life?
yeah. Well, so it, when I think about it, I think that the core values have kind of accrued, additively. So the passion for creativity and the value of creativity, came very early on in my life, in childhood. And then the next one is really collaboration, and that developed. I mean, I did something. I When I was in elementary school with my friends, we put on plays and things like that. So I already, enjoyed collaboration. But I got into it much more in college. Collaborating, I was also studying dance and choreography, and I would collaborate with composers who would, create music, and then I would create dance to that. And then the collaboration on films with my husband. And then I've also collaborated with other composers over the years who've set my poetry to music. And that's one of my great joys also. That when the words are sung, it brings another energy to them, and the voices of the singers. For me, poetry is not just something that's on a page in a book in a library. It's that's great, um, but I love it when poetry is spoken aloud, and when it's sung and given voice. That to me is especially magical, especially meaningful. Um, so uh Yeah, so um, the Latin American projects, I was continuing to work with those. And then one thing that kind of shifted for me, it started actually with something rather unpleasant. I injured my back. And when I was recuperating from the back injury, I kept trying to go back to my teaching job, and my back kept acting up. And so eventually I had to just kind of get the message that, to move on from that. And at that point, um, my husband and I really focused on, our films, and I focused more on my writing, and, was able to move forward more of the projects that way. And then partly because of the back injury, I got interested in Reiki, which is a healing art that comes from Japan. And it's a kind of an energy healing. If you've heard of like Tai Chi or Qigong, the Qi is the life force energy. And the same thing with Reiki, the Ki is the life force energy. And so it's a practice of kind of opening oneself up to more awareness of life force energy, and in the intention to um, you know draw on it personally and share it with others. And when I got uh, started training in that, it really shifted my way of seeing my work also. That this goal of sharing with people and being part of healing, healing myself, healing others, being part of the healing of our community, kind of moved to the forefront. And so that affected again both the core values, really the core value of community developed, and of generosity, of giving to others, and of healing, focus on healing. And that really translated into my work. I started a new project, basically like year, yeah, the same year that I kind of completed my major Reiki training. I started a new poetry project, which was writing some poems for a book that was going to be for an auction for a fundraiser. And this was proposed to me by a woman in my meditation group. And she was going to make an artist book, and invited me to write poetry, that she could create an artist book and we would auction it off at the fundraiser. And she showed me a number of styles of artist books. And the one that interested me the most was what's called a flag book. And it has, the pages are cut so that it's not just a single page. It has 3 parts of each page, but they're kind of staggered. So when you open it, it's a little bit like a pop-up book.
Okay.
And so it had 10 sets of these 3 flags. So I thought, okay, I'll write 30 poems. And because the flags, are not that big, I'll make them short. I'll, write like 6 to 8 line poems. So I started working with that, and then I thought, okay, well, 30 poems, sort of like a month, 30 is like a month. So I thought, well, okay, well, I'll do this as kind of a daily practice of writing. And the first group were 30 poems of longing. And another part of the timing of this was it happened as I was just coming out of a grieving process for a childhood friend, a very close friend, who had very tragically been murdered. And so that, in a very shocking, painful experience, took a while, to process, but as I was starting to come out of it, and got this invitation to do these poems for this book, I felt like I was kind of writing my way back into life. So the first set were 30 poems of longing, and it's kind of, longing for connection, and especially, kind of a deeper spiritual connection. And so I wrote those, and we made the artist book, and we auctioned it off at the event. And then I found that type of poetry just kept flowing through me. And so I kept going with it, and I wouldn't literally write it every day, but at least once a week, sometimes 3 or 4 a week, just depending how the schedule was. And again, just with this goal of something that I could share with people that might support them in their spiritual journey. So I wrote, after the 30 poems of longing, I wrote 30 poems of joy, and then 30 poems of love. And that became the first book collection. So each book, now that it's published, it's a series of 4 books, and each one has 3 cycles of 30 poems. So the first book is titled Swimming in God, and it has 30 poems of longing, and 30 poems of joy, and 30 poems of love. And then the second collection is called Dancing Through Fire, and that one has 30 poems of wisdom, 30 poems each of wisdom, passion, and peace. And that came out of the time when my mother died. And again, the grieving and healing from the grieving really came through as writing poetry to process the emotions. And so passion in this, it's partly passion for life, but it's also passion in the sense of pain, going through pain. And then the third collection, it's called Drinking Pure Light, and that one has 30 poems each of courage, compassion, and surrender. And then the fourth collection is called Singing Fierce Gratitude, and that one has 30 poems each of abundance, generosity, and gratitude. So those are the...
Well, pick one of those.
Yeah,
And
I'm dying to hear your poems.
All right. Well, let me, these poems are very short, so they're 30 seconds each.
Okay.
So I'd like to maybe intersperse a few as we talk, but let me start with one. And I do something that I learned from the poet Robert Bly, because they're so short. I will read it twice, because when people are just hearing and not seeing it on the page, they can kind of get a better grasp of it. And in particular, what Robert Bly would say is that the first hearing kind of enters into the mind, our thinking. The second hearing kind of soaks down more to the heart and our feeling. So I will read one twice. This is from 30 Poems of Longing, and it's number 18. A fire dances in the copper brazier, and embers float upward in the night sky. Their passion makes them lighter than air. They do not think how to reach God, but only burn as brightly as they can this night. A fire dances in the copper brazier, and embers float upward in the night sky. Their passion makes them lighter than air. They do not think how to reach God, but only burn as brightly as they can this night.
Nice. Yeah. So what I get from that, the message, my interpretation is that we are just being who we are without trying to aim, being pure, being passion, letting our passion drive us and be pure without any motive, not trying to impress God or reach God or just being as good and pure as we could be. Does that make
That's
sense?
beautiful. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I get from it.
Yeah. The
Awesome.
wonderful thing about poetry is that each person, it resonates with them individually.
Yeah.
And
That's why I
that's
was almost afraid to say. I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm really wrong and off, far off from it. But to me, yeah, it's like just being you. And that's good enough. That's good enough for God. That's good enough for the world. That's good enough. And,
exactly.
using your passion, being who you are, just being, because I feel like a lot of people get stifled and they are confined by society's
Right.
judgments. And
Yeah.
so if you're just free to burn and go up in your way without any motivations, without trying to impress anyone else or God or whoever, whatever
Mhm.
um, that's living. That's life.
Mhm.
Um, beautiful. Yeah,
Thank
beautiful.
you. Yeah.
Moving.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing about the creative process is, I don't, I don't take ownership of it. I just feel like, what I do is I show up and I pay attention. And then, you could call it the muse, you could call it the unconscious, you could call it spirit, whatever, just kind of comes in and, you know, and guides
Yeah.
that. So I just kind of show up and listen and, write it down and then, process it with the skills that I have. But I don't feel like it's mine. And that's part of, also why I feel like it's to be shared and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
for community and generosity.
Yeah. Well, anything that moves people, gets people thinking and feeling, I think is so valuable to society. So, yeah, good work. Nice. Awesome. So, yeah, you talked about the Reiki, and I'm interested in that because is Reiki a verbal exchange with someone else you're talking, or is it a physical? I mean, I feel like they have sticks or something they use. Tongs.
No,
I don't know what it is. What is it?
Actually, there are some people who do that, but I haven't really been exposed to that. So the interesting thing about Reiki, or one interesting thing, is it started in Japan, um, uh, from a person called Mikao Usui, who developed it, and he was very interested in healing and read things from all over the world about healing, and then he went on a retreat for 21 days, and kind of received a vision about healing and developed this practice out of that. And so this was like in the probably the late 1800s, and he was practicing and teaching in the early 1900s. There was if I remember correctly, there was an earthquake in Japan, and you know, he and his students helped a lot, with providing healing at that time. And then a woman from Hawaii, who was of Japanese descent, went and studied with him, and then she brought it back to Hawaii, and then people studied with her and brought it to the mainland US. Um, and so most of the practice, the Western practice, comes through this woman who studied it, Madame Takata. But after I studied the Western approach for a number of years, then I found a teacher who had gone and studied it in Japan. And my husband does this too, so we studied with him as well. And it is a combination of practices. Some of them are meditations. There are like mantras and chanting that are part of the practice. The part that's most known is the hands-on healing
Right.
part of
I've
it.
I've actually had a couple of Reiki treatments or sessions, um, and I sort of originally thought it would be like shiatsu, a form of massage. Very wrong. Very wrong. Um, it really is the laying on of hands or just above the skin, and either transferring or receiving energy feelings. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but and the interesting thing was the two times I did it, the person, two different people. Trying to think, I believe once was in California, and the other time was in Santa Fe. Both top places I was living, and just met people who were into it. And what they came away with, they say, well, this is what I feel. This is what I get out of this. And both times it was like, yeah, okay, sure, no problem. And both times they nailed it. They nailed the physical things that were going on, either the mental or the physical things that were going on in me at that time, or not necessarily at that time, but were about to happen
Mhm.
within the next couple of months. I would say. And so it's something where I'll sit back and I'll go, okay, I'll pay attention to this. I'll hear what it's about. There's a lot of things you hear about. Coincidence certainly is part of life, but these things nailed it.
But what
And
is it? Like, what do you do? What's the process? Do you lay down on a table and they put their hands on you, or
correct, or right above you.
and how
And
they do they put them in strategic places because they
yeah,
know the energy field, or
is
they magic? Like what?
is is Reiki the home of the chakra, if I'm not mistaken? Or
Uh, the the Western school of Reiki uses the chakra system. The Japanese Reiki does not. The chakras actually come um, from India. That concept comes from Indian philosophy. But
right,
so yeah, hand placement is like the crown chakra, the brow chakra, the throat chakra, the heart chakra, solar plexus, and sacrum, the root chakra, and then like the knees and ankles and feet, and um, you know, so in the Western school really focuses on the chakras.
gotcha. All right,
Right. Thank you for explaining that because I was so curious. I can't imagine what it is. I've heard of it, but I never knew what it
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
So
And
okay.
the in the Western approach, the idea is that the, whether whether it's a client or a friend or whoever is receiving the Reiki, that the person who's quote giving the Reiki is functioning as like a channel for this universal life force energy to
right,
flow
Okay.
through them to the person that they're again either touching or hands a few inches above them, or like beaming at them, or even in through intention sending it over distance to someone. um so and the idea is that it's the intention of the receiver that stimulates the flow. So that's the Western approach. The Japanese approach is very interesting. It's more Buddhistic, and that what they say is there's no giver, there's no receiver, and there's nothing being given. And the idea is, it's again, Kelly, like you were saying for the poem, it's about just being, that we are all spiritual beings, and when we're just being together and kind of being as one, and experiencing our interconnectedness, that's how the energy flow happens, and that's how the healing happens, and that healing kind of flows from the spirit to the mind to the emotions to the body. And the same thing with the idea is with illness, that if there's a disruption in the spirit, it affects the mind, the emotions, and then shows up in the body. And so rather than just address the body, you try to address all those layers for healing to happen.
What I hear, having not experienced this, is sitting with a friend who's troubled, and you're emotionally just there for them, and letting their pain go through you and letting them kind of release it, or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's
You'd want it someone that you care about or cares about you, or that they're free of whatever trash of the mind, I guess, if they're doing this with you. That's what I would think.
Yeah. So yeah, ultimately it's really a practice of compassion
Mm-hmm.
and of unconditional love, of
Mm-hmm.
kind of opening a space of unconditional love, like you would sit with a friend, a loved one, a family member, and just try to be that with them and for them.
Yeah, because that's how, that sometimes that's all you need. If you've gone through something tragic, loss of a loved one or something, an illness or painful, and you just need a friend to just be with you, just
Yeah.
sit there and be with you. So that's kind of what I'm hearing that is. So, okay. Thanks for explaining though the details and how it works. I'd like to know how things work. So
Here is one. This is from I can show you the book cover if it shows up. Okay. This is from Drinking Pure Light, Daily Poems of Courage, Compassion, and Surrender. And let me see if I can get enough light here. I have under natural light and it's starting to fade a little bit, but I think I can get it. Okay. This is number 3 of the 30 Poems of Courage. And again, I'll read it twice to give that,
okay.
Once for the mind, once for the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Courage is not certainty, it is trust. The acorn falling to loamy ground has no certainty of what comes next, nor does it stare up the grand trunks surrounding it with any envy or awe. It trusts the truth of splitting open, reaching deep, and drinking in light. Courage is not certainty, it is trust. The acorn falling to loamy ground has no certainty of what comes next, nor does it stare up the grand trunks surrounding it with any envy or awe. It trusts the truth of splitting open, reaching deep, and drinking in light.
John, do you want to go for this one?
No, go ahead. I am not one to discuss
Interpret
poetry.
poems.
Yeah.
To me, it's similar to, it's again, just being and trusting that
Mhm.
life's going to work out as long as you show up and do your part. Drinking in the light, and everything's going to be fine. And that almost makes me choke up, because every time I've gone through a bad time, I just knew, trust, it's going to get good again. I'm going to make it. I'm going to get through this. This is life. And we just keep going and just have that faith that things are going to be fine. I always try to make this quick. I had a lump in one of my breasts, and immediately, like, okay, I'm gonna die of breast cancer. That's it. I'm dying. I'm gonna die. It's over. And then, so I bought this book about breast cancer and, how it works and what could happen. And then I thought, well, oh, maybe I won't die. Maybe I'll just have breast cancer and I'll have to get a double mastectomy and I'll have no boobs. And then, well, they can rebuild them. Okay. So I made it there. And then, oh, well, wait, what if I don't have breast cancer? What if it's nothing? So I kind of went backwards from dying to, living. And by the time I had the surgery to get the lump removed, I had lived through it all. I was over it. And it made the surgery so much easier. I remember they put these warm blankets on me. They were heated, like in a microwave or some kind of thing. And it felt so good. And, when I woke up and I had to wait for the results from the biopsy. And when I went to the doctor, that day I was like, well, it felt like a day at the spa. So even if I'm going to die, I had a nice day because, I was asleep through everything. And then it was Thanksgiving week. I went to the doctor and to get the results. And he said, I did 5 surgeries that week and you're the only one that didn't have breast cancer. And so it was, and you want to find meaning in everything. And sometimes it's just coincidental. It's, those other women didn't do anything to deserve their breast cancer. But I just felt like I lived through it already. So I didn't need to live through it because I put myself through it. And some people say, oh, be positive, always think the best. I don't work that way. I go to the worst because I want to be prepared. And if you tell me you have cancer, you're dead. I have killed you. You're dead. And then I work backwards, like, oh, okay, So I feel okay with it. So anyway, I feel like that was, to me, that's what I heard is, whatever life gives you, just have trust. You're going through the motions. You're living, and even if I had breast cancer, then that's my lot, and I fight it, and I may die. I may, like, in 3 months, 6 months, whatever, die. But then I get to say goodbye to everyone. And, you just try to find the silver lining, I guess, and everything. So to me, I heard just trust life.
Mhm.
Trust whatever life gives you. Do you show up and do your part and you're going to survive. Sorry, I didn't mean to make that so long. But yeah,
No, it's really interesting to hear,
Yeah.
different people's
how it
takes on
resonates
things.
with you, what it
Yeah.
stimulates, and um, you know, to me, the poem is kind of saying that, even with the things that are very challenging, like with my back injury, my back injury really changed my life. I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do anymore. And earlier on, when I injured my knees and I couldn't dance anymore,
Oh,
um, those things challenge us, but then they also give us the opportunity to kind of break open to another level of authenticity, another level of
yeah.
spirituality. It sounds like the way you work through something, there's that shock, and you prepare yourself by thinking, well, what's the worst that could happen, and then kind of working back from there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you figure you live through it. And if you don't live through it, then you don't live through it because we're all going to die at some point. So, um, I just like to be emotionally prepared. I don't like,
Hmm.
so I go to the worst case scenario first and then work my way back from there. So anyway, yeah, that was beautiful. Moving.
Thank you. Let me just look. There's a couple more that I would like to share. Um, find it. Where did it go? Okay, one about passion, one about peace. Okay, so this is from 30 Poems of Passion, number 1. Diving in is the essential act. Passion is immersion in sound, light, flesh. Pull the ripcord of your soul and dare that soaring flight. Life is a free fall into death. Joyous abandon the flaring parachute. Diving in is the essential act. Passion is immersion in sound, light, flesh. Pull the ripcord of your soul and dare that soaring flight. Life is a free fall into death. Joyous abandon the flaring parachute.
Yep. Yeah. Go for it. I mean, I just hear go for it. Again, I can relate to it because that's how my life's always been. I never had some grand plan. I remember in high school, my senior year, it was like towards the end of the year, you're a senior, you're graduating soon. And it was in between classes. I had whatever was walking the halls in, not in between classes while class was in session. So I was alone, pondering as a young person, not knowing much about life. And I just thought, I want to know a little bit about a lot of things. I want to be very well rounded in life. So that was it. That was my goal. And I've done so many things and just jumped in and taken chances and pulled the ripcord and moved different places, done different jobs, dated different men. I mean, just had such a rich life. And it's because I've lived fearlessly. I mean, I have fears. I'm terrified of spiders, but I'm not afraid of life. I'm not afraid of life. I'm like, bring it on. Let me try it. I'll do it. So that's what I get from that. To me, it was very clear for that.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's a delight to be able to.
Well,
Yeah.
before we wrap this up, though, tell us what you are currently working on, your current
But
project.
she has one more. She has another poem. The
Sorry,
peace.
didn't know
This
that.
is for you. Peace.
Oh,
Yeah.
the piece
One
of-
more
yeah.
piece. Yes. I'll
Hit me.
wrap up with this and then then
So pay attention, John. It's
what's
about
going
peace.
on.
I will.
Okay. So this is from 30 Poems of Peace, number 30. Remember, dear ones, peace is a choice. Even amidst crashing waves of grief, pain, despair, stands a lighthouse with a glowing beacon, warm as sunlight, pouring out love. Swim for it. Even amid the cacophony of worry, frustration, anger, a clear, true note shimmers. Tune your ears to peace. Remember, dear ones, peace is a choice. Even amidst crashing waves of grief, pain, despair, stands a lighthouse with a glowing beacon, warm as sunlight, pouring out love. Swim for it. Even amid the cacophony of worry, frustration, anger, a clear, true note shimmers. Tune your ears to peace.
Wonderful words. Sadly, I don't think there aren't many people looking at the lighthouse right now. But yes, there is that glow of peace coming off of it if they would just look. It is, peace is so much simpler to have than anything that is opposite peace. Everything opposite peace just takes so much effort and is so destructive in so many ways. It doesn't have to be war. It could just be words. And there's so much, it just seems it is so, takes so much work to do those things and so little work to have the peace that we should rightfully have. But they work so much harder at the opposite of peace. And that's just how I see it. I don't know if that's how your words were meant to tell us, but
Well, it's like peace in your heart. It's like when things are going bad and there's turmoil all around, having that calm
Yep.
peace, knowing there's a light at the end of the tunnel or the lighthouse. Things always work out. They always do. And having that kind of faith, I think for me, that gives me a sense of peace in amidst turmoil. And I'm not always successful at it because sometimes I worry too much. But yeah, I think that would be the goal, is having peace in your heart, which peace in your heart creates peace in the world. Beautiful. Very moving poems.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
very moving. Thank you. Yes.
So tell us, what's your most current project, and take us out with that one.
Great. So now that these 4 books are out, I'm working on sharing them with people. And, I've been going places, doing book signings, doing
Can people
readings.
buy them?
Oh,
Where can
yes.
people buy them? Where can they buy
Oh,
them?
where can people buy them? The books are available from the publisher on the Pilgrim Press.
Okay.
I included a
that email
website for
or
that.
that
Yeah.
website. Yeah.
And
Okay.
they're also on Amazon, either way.
Okay.
But they're easier to find, through that website. It has my name and it lists the 4 books.
Okay.
And then one of the things that I'm working on right now is a performance of poetry, music, and dance that I'm organizing, and it's going to be November 23rd, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, at 3 p.m. In Long Beach, but it's also going to be live streamed on YouTube and then available afterward on YouTube. So we have 5 poets performing, myself, a friend of mine who is an African-American poet who was a freedom rider in the 60s and a member of SNCC. She's an amazing poet. And then 3 other poets, including the Long Beach Youth Poet Laureate, who's 15, and another one of the Long Beach Youth Poet Ambassadors, who's also 15. So we basically have 4 generations of poets reading, and then music that's settings of some of my poetry. Some will be sung by a choir, and then some will be sung by a soprano soloist. And then a local dance company will be performing several of their existing works, and as well as a new work that they're creating to one of the poems that's set to music. The poem that they're creating the new piece to is called Compassion Begins at Home. So on the theme of compassion, the whole concert, the title of it is Confluent Spirit, Art, and Justice. So how spirit, art, and justice flow together. And we'll be exploring that with these several art forms.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. This was all very interesting and entertaining for sure.
Yeah, and thanks for the work you do. I think the world needs more creativity and more compassion and peace and love and all of that. So thank you for sharing it through the arts, because sometimes that's the only way we can reach people, some people. So
Thank you
thank you.
both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For inviting me to share.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Really nice to meet you, Tina. Take
Nice
care.
meeting you.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take it easy, folks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. All views expressed in this video belong to Kellie Nicholson, John D'Amore, and guests. These discussions do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which they have been affiliated now or will be in the future. The opinions expressed are solely theirs, and since they are critically thinking human beings, these views are subject to change, subject to revision, and subject to rethinking at any time. These conversations are not meant to be taken as advice and are only for the purpose of entertainment. All statements may be based on hearsay and not necessarily valid proof of any claims in this video. It is not our intention to teach or advise on any topic. Unless otherwise noted, all photos are public domain. Thanks for watching A Slice of Life with Kellie and John.